So we're in 3 John, the book right before Jude. And it's a very small book. But there's just a lot of wisdom in it and a lot to take away from it in how we should look at ourselves and how we handle people and how we are loving toward them, whether we know them or don't know them, whether they're strangers or family or friends. So we got to understand what's going on here. This is a very personal letter from John to Gaius, and he's just loving on him. But he also does some rebuking in the letter. So
yeah, I mean, to me, like, it's just, if you're reading through it, it doesn't take long, but it's just like a letter and he's like dealing with personalities.
Yes.
Which is going to happen anytime you have a group of people, whether it's a church, any event, you're going to have different personalities. And to me, that's kind of what this epistle that John wrote is worth, or what he's talking about. I read the word worth while I said that. I don't know why. But yeah, so to me, it's just dealing with personalities is kind of what he's dealing with here. He's got a really good friend he's writing to. In fact, I read today, they think, as we read through here, you'll see it, but they were saying that, what's his name, Gaius?
Gaius is how you pronounce it.
So they actually believe that he was a convert of one of John's.
Yes.
You'll read later on. So that's kind of cool to think about.
He calls him the under shepherd. John calls himself the under shepherd of the Lord, but he calls himself elder to Gaius.
And then something, I talked to Dustin about it today. I was here at lunchtime, and most scholars believe this was the last written word of John. So they think really he wrote John, then he wrote Revelation, and then 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. You can kind of, like, reading through this, you can kind of see Revelation was a better end to the book than this was. Because when we get to the end of this, he's like, hey, I'm done talking because I'm getting ready to come see you. So it wouldn't have been a real good way to end the Bible. I mean, so we always got to remember it's not exactly in order. But that's just what most people believe, that this is his last writing right here.
Because some of these were written, I mean, they overlap in unison.
Mm-hmm.
And to
remember, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John might have been written in a couple days.
Yes.
They're not very big.
And those 3 books, Revelation and John, were all written within 10 years. In a 10-year time frame. They're not 100. You can't just know exactly the day.
Yep.
So, but they're all written in near the date of the 90-95 time frame. So I'm just going to read a little bit. We're going to read 1 through 4. We'll go there and we'll see what that looks like. Because after that, it starts to change a little bit. So he opens up, and if you know anything about John, John's big on very loving openings. And he starts off with verse 1. It says, "The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. For I was very glad when the brethren came and testified to your truth, that is, how you are walking in truth. I have no greater joy than to hear this, to hear of my children walking in the truth." And as much as we talk about the great entrances John has on letters when he's talking to churches and people, this is actually a really brief one. But because the opening greeting is literally the elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in the truth, which starts off that way because he says I'm an elder to him, which is why Pastor Hayden's theory there is very, very much probably the realistic part of it. He probably is the one that led Gaius to the Lord, to Jesus.
And also the reason they believe that is because of 4, since we're talking about that. It says, I have no greater joy than this, that to hear of my children walking in truth. So they believe that John led him to the belief in Christ and what he did, and that's why he calls him basically one of his children, and sees that he's still walking in that truth that he believed in to start with. So yes. That's the 2 reasons why. They also said there, the elder to the beloved Gaius, and then they also said that at this point he was Gaius was actually a very up in age person. When it's talking about elders, they said, they use the word elder there, and it's not necessarily the elder like we use in a church setting, but they're actually meaning he was just up in age elder in that statement right there. But interesting.
So, beloved, I pray that in all respects that you may prosper and be in good health. So I love it because he's opening this up with the mindset of, I want you to not just be in good health, but I want you to prosper also, which I love that for us, because it's okay to ask God to help us prosper in life, to have things. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the heart we go to it. And as a matter of fact, John's here saying, I'm praying for you, not just to have good health, but in that good health to be able to prosper, to enjoy life just as your soul prospers. So he cares for, John's talking about just like as God would. He's caring for every aspect of us. He cares mostly for our soul, right? Because that's the most important part. He says, as your soul prospers, because it does us no good to have a worldly prosper, right? If our soul doesn't prosper as well. Our soul has to be the most important, most forthcoming for us. It has to be the number one. Our soul needs to grow because that's the most important, grow closer to the Lord. And I love it because he says, as your soul prospers, I pray that you have good health. I pray that you have, prosperous life, that you have some stuff, that you're not constantly in need and want, but that the Lord just blesses you with that, but as your soul grows.
Yeah,
as it prospers.
That's what I like, that he did both, physical and spiritual. He covered them both right there in prospering. And then in verse 3 there, it goes on to talk about truth. It says truth twice there. Truth, with the first truth is the doctrine, the teaching of the apostles, what Jesus did on the cross, the resurrection of him. So that's that first truth. But then the second truth, he's talking about his conduct. So not just that he knows Christ and that he knows that his salvation, but he's walking it out. We talk all the time how much more important, or as important, I shouldn't say more because it's not more, but as important as the walk as that first time salvation. You got to keep walking out. You got to keep diving into the truth. And that's why these two truths are mentioned here. You go back to the second epistle of John, it says that truth is worth standing for. And this one, it's saying truth is worth working for. And so I think that's something we got to think about. They're talking here, truth is worth working for. This one writer today put, in my life, in God is my salvation, with God is my communion and fellowship, and for God is my service. And I kind of like the way he said that. And he covers all those in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. So pretty good words from John here about truth and what it means and conducting our lives to live it out, but also just knowing what he did on the cross.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of boils down all of John's letters so far, is the importance of testifying verbally to the truth of the gospel, but walking it out. That's got to be what we look at as, that's the testimony. The testimony can't be caught up in who I am or who I was. The testimony has to be caught up in, look what God is doing in every step of my life, and not only in my words, but watch my actions. When hard times hit, I'm not wavering. I'm going to stay the truth with the gospel. I'm going to stay the truth with what he has for me, because in that are blessings. And that's not why we do it, but in it, as the truth is, there's blessings. And if not here, we know eternally. So
I jotted down here, it's not so much walking in truth as much as it is, and not how you walk, is almost as much as where you walk.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, you can't sit here right now and tell me if you're not consistently coming to church and doing Bible studies, it's a lot easier to walk the walk than if you're not. So it is on how you walk this walk, but a lot of it means where you walk it. To me,
it's easy to get caught up in the world. I mean, you just look at church attendance, for example. And I've been in church for a long time. You've been in church way longer than I have. And some of you have been in church for quite some time. Church attendance when the weather's nice is not the same as church attendance when the weather's not nice. People come to church when it's nasty outside because, and I get vacations happen in the summertime, and I know people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we can get ourselves as quick out of the habit as we can get ourselves into the habit of gathering together in the body. And that's part of our walk, is the consistency.
I think everybody's done it at some point, if you've been a Christian very long at all.
Well, when I first met Hayden was a weekend warrior with the lake.
Oh, man.
Not the church. I don't think you'd be afraid to talk about it. I mean, that's part of the where God's brought you from. And when he answered the call to preach, right? Well, before that, actually. Before that.
It's when somebody wanted to start a church in my basement.
Sold his camper, sold his boat. And when he sold his boat, everybody thought, you're crazy. What are you doing? Like,
So I literally went from my happiest place in the world on this week to us talking about planting a church in Mansfield to the next weekend. I made everybody go to the lake again because it was my happy place, and I hated every aspect of it to the point I had pictures of all of it on the no, it wasn't Facebook. I sold it on Craigslist. On Craigslist by Monday morning. I've never seen anything like it. Do I miss some of that? Absolutely. Do I still go to the lake? Sure. But that's how fast it changed for me, for sure, what he's talking about.
But I think the Lord knew that he had to do that with you because it was still all right there. How easy it would have been to be like,
oh, yeah.
Just going back to it.
Yeah. I got this much invested in it. I got to go. So, yep, for sure. Still my happy place, by the way. If you really want to see me happy, go to the lake with me.
I've never seen him come back happy, though. He asks me all the time. He says, him and Benji ask me all the time, when are you going to go boat fishing with us? I'm like, when are you going to do it happily? Because they tell me how great it is, and they tell me about boat fires and almost getting shot by an arrow. I'm like, and then they're out there shivering with fish, and like, what part of joy is this?
It's fun, isn't it, London? See?
Yeah. You say that right now. I want you to call me in the middle of the next one and say, this is great, and be honest with me. I think the idea of it might be good, but...
But no, and it is a lot easier to walk the walk if you are surrounding yourself with people, like-minded people, for sure.
But don't get me wrong. The Lord knows you need rest, you need recuperation time, you need vacations.
Yep.
But we got to be mindful. Brett and I just talked about somebody earlier that we're praying for. We'll come back to church. They've been gone for a while. Said they were going to be gone for a couple weeks, and now they've been gone like a month and a half. Because it's easy to be like, okay, I'll be back, but then all of a sudden, the habit of sleeping in and not gathering up takes us away from that soul prospering situation, which takes away from the other things. I have no greater joy than this, to hear that my children walking in the truth. And when I read that from John, like that is from the lips of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's what God wants to be able to say about each one of us. He wants to be able to look at us and say, I have no greater joy than to see you walking where I've told you to walk and following me.
And I think, in all honesty, I'm not a head pastor, he is, but still, when you see like people that you've helped either lead to the Lord or shepherd, and you see them going out, doing what we're supposed to do, you get this same feeling. Like you get really excited to see somebody walking in truth that you have had a part in. Not what they're doing is anything you've done, because they're letting God work, but there's still that, just like there, no greater joy when you see somebody walking out that truth that you've helped disciple or whatever. It's pretty cool to see that walked out.
On the flip side of that, it's
heartbreaking
when you see them not walking out.
Yeah, for sure. And everybody, if you have friends that are Christians, you've seen both sides of it. Everybody in this room has. So
those few verses right there about Gaius' godly life, about his godly walk, about his walking where he's supposed to. Now, this next few verses are going to be about his treatment of ministers and of fellow Christians. So we're going to read 5 through 8. And it says here, Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they are strangers. And they have testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. For they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men so that they may be fellow workers with the truth. There's so much packed in this little bit right here. So we'll just kick it off with, once again, beloved. He's talking to the believers, to the ones that are doing the ministry work. So he's talking to Gaius, but he's also, I think he truly meant for Gaius to go share this with the people that he's doing ministry with, because
I'm sure
he doesn't want to stop it there.
It doesn't really say it, but I'm sure Gaius is a leader in this church, if not the head leader.
It's believed that he's not only the leader of this church, but possibly a few in the area there, because he would have been.
It doesn't just exactly say it, but you almost have to assume he is.
Yeah. And so he's just for acting faithfully. And I talked Sunday a little bit about being faithful. It's kind of a missed thing anymore about being faithful to something. Sometimes the only thing we're faithful to is the things we're not supposed to be faithful to. We get a little faithful to sin sometimes. And so he's He's talking about being faithful for acting it out, not just talking about it, but acting it out and the things you accomplish with the brethren, with the fellow believers, with the ones that are walking it also, but especially when you don't even know them, when they're strangers. Mm-hmm. And I started to that just kind of rang to me, because we have so many people in our church. I do enjoy this part so much, because we have so many people in our church that will just bring a random stranger to church with them. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but it happens on many Sundays that we have people that will bring strangers with them because they picked them up on the way here, or they just met them at the gas station, or whatever the reason may be. There's multiple reasons, but they love them, and they bring them to the one place that they know that they can get something that is beyond what they can give them, God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what John's telling Gaius right here. He's like, you're doing great work with the brethren, but also with strangers that are coming through, that are brethren also, but you haven't even met them. They're just coming through, and you're supporting them.
Yeah, and another thing there by the brethren, it says he's commending Gaius for having and received, entertained these true teachers of the word. And I think that's big as a church. Somebody, they maybe don't go to church here, but they're true believers in the word, the same way, those non-negotiables, we're supposed to receive them, entertain them, in this aspect, be nice to them. It's going to go a lot farther than not, especially to the world.
Absolutely.
And you think back in 2 John, he's at the same time the apostles were warning against receiving false teachers, but we're kind of talking about two different things here, because it's not false teachers necessarily. It says brethren, so that means they're believers. And so he's saying to accept these believers. And then, so don't get confused when he said, so much of 2, if you remember, 2 John was about the false prophets and false teachers. But here in 3 John, he's encouraging the believer to receive the true brethren. So if you know they're believers, if you know they believe the way you do about those non-negotiables, receive them. Be nice to them. Do life with them. Try to reach the lost with them.
Well, when you look at this scripture specific, it talks about, if you know a little bit of history, he's talking to a lot to the Jewish community that has converted. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking strangers, when you're a Jew, you didn't want, when you live in that Jewish community, you didn't want a stranger coming in, because it wasn't kosher in their society to bring in a Gentile to stay in their home to do those things. So he's saying, I commend you, and I think it's important that he even added stranger, because he's like, listen, you're not limiting yourself to those that believe. You're even bringing in those that don't have the same belief as you, same culture background. You're just bringing them in, and you're loving on them, and you're doing exactly what Jesus was doing when he was walking. He wasn't just limiting it to Gentiles or Jews or anybody in specific, for just specific. He's saying you're doing it for everybody, so it's just that much more special. Mm-hmm.
And then in 7 there, one reader I read over today, it said, that the last part of 7 kind of sounds weird, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. It didn't say not to accept the Gentiles, what Pastor D just said. But they said what John was saying here was for them not to take any money from unbelievers.
Yes.
Is what they said, that this is exactly what John meant. And he said, this guy, he was a pastor for a long time. He's saying, even in his church, he would tell, if you're in our church and you're a non-believer, don't give. This pastor believed that God couldn't even bless money given by a non-believer, because he believes that the church is supposed to carry the church, money-wise, prayer-wise. So, and he's saying right here, he says what they're saying right here is accept nothing from the Gentiles, as in money, not them, but their money or whatever to further the kingdom, because God will take care of that through the people of God. So kind of interesting thought, but you can kind of see that, to accept nothing from them. But once again, he's not saying don't accept them.
Right.
Big difference. So.
Well, and you can see a switch in cultural understanding of the word brethren
mm-hmm.
right here.
Yeah.
Because brethren used to be Jew to Jew.
Jew to Jew.
And mm-hmm. when he's saying that, I mean, he's literally saying, and what I love about this is this kind of defines a little bit of the grafting into the Gentile when they get saved into that lineage. We're now become a part of that lineage. Not that we're Jewish bloodline, but we're now in that adopted state with God's chosen people. We're in that with them. So now I believe that's why he's still using the word brethren, because that was still the cultural dynamic for talking mm-hmm. Jew to Jew. But now we're now adopted into the bloodline. So he's So now he's still Gentile is would be considered unsaved in the mindset.
Yeah.
And
For
now
the whole- for the most,
brethren is now
yeah.
a believer in the lineage of Christ.
Yeah, because it was a grafting in process even back then, and still to today. I mean, the way the Bible reads, we're
Absolutely,
grafted
and
in.
I think that's one of those things that we've got to be mindful of. Sometimes we put the Jewish culture on a back burner as if they don't matter to God anymore. They're
His
still
chosen
God's
people.
first, his first chosen.
Always got to remember, they're the bride of Jehovah, and we're the bride of Christ, and that kind of just sums it up. They're still as important as we are.
Absolutely, and so therefore we ought to support such men so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. And I 100% believe this today, and I think that if the church did what it's supposed to do, we would be able to send more people to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think this is a lot right here talking about supporting missions and
Yeah.
people going out and people coming in that has been out.
Absolutely.
I mean, they were,
We kind of leave a lot of missionaries out there to just kind of fend for themselves.
Yeah.
Which they shouldn't have to. It says right there, literally, we should take care of them, love them, make sure they go on their way prepared and ready. And that means with food and finances and whatever it is that they
which
need.
we haven't had a lot come through this church, but when we have, they have been very well taken care of.
Yes. And
By
we do
the
a lot of
church.
local missions because there's still a lot to do here.
Yeah.
But we do have some that we help out with.
I mean, I think about Santiago. He was blown away from the help that this church gave him to go on that mission. So, anytime we've had one come through, we've always taken care of it, and I'm very proud of the church for that.
And with Santiago, we may have even come across a way that's going to cut his
Where he can reach a lot more
where
people.
we can cut his cost down to
Almost nothing.
like nothing almost. So which is going to be amazing for his ministry. I don't know that we can do it this year, but next year. So where he needed $4,000 or $5,000 to go just to Utah, I think Caden and I have got it figured out, and we're gonna meet with him when he comes back. That he may be able to $4,000 or $5,000 may take care of a full year's ministries, which is pretty amazing. But that's
For
all
sure.
God and how He uses technology in His way. So we're thankful for that.
Well, let's talk about the not so good brethren.
Yeah, because Diotrephes, he's a bit different. All right, so I'm going to read 9. I'm just going to read 9 real quick. So it says, I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be the first among them, does not accept what we say. I want to read that first because we need to kind of stop there. That's going to set the stage for everything wrong with Diotrephes, because he's...
Yeah, remember what I said. He's writing to three people. Gaius, which is the beloved, doing great. This guy is a dictator.
Yeah,
He likes he wants to be in charge. And, you can read it right there in 9. He wants to be the first among them. He wants the big stage. That's going to be his, no matter what. I don't know. That's just how he immediately jumps out. I think that's how he's writing him in here.
Well, and when I read verse 9, the very beginning of it, I wrote something to the church. That means there was some church discipline.
Yeah.
He had to be addressed. And obviously, I think at some point in time, he kind of got to a level of importance. Obviously, you can read by the way it is. And now it's kind of gone to his head. We see the same kind of mindset with Satan, right? He was created for good, but it went to his head, and his ego got the best of him. And we see this Diotrephes, he's kind of God meant it for good, but now he's letting his ego get in the way, and he wants to be the limelight. And I'll tell you that phrase, I don't remember who that quote was from that trip to Atlanta, but there was a quote that said, let the light shine brighter out of you than the light that's shining on you.
Yeah. And
because I don't know why, maybe they just need to come up here more often, but I don't know why anybody wants to come up here. There's an enormous amount of pressure, just even with a group this size, and to know that you're held accountable for everything you say to that group of people from this word. I don't know why anybody would want to do it. Limelight. It's nerve-wracking to me.
But he also, he just, all right, we'll just get real.
He does not accept what we say.
We've all been, a lot of us have been in church a long time. Most churches have this person sitting there. We've seen it. A lot of them are on the church boards. You've seen pastors good pastors drove out of good churches by people like this guy. And I mean, it's just the thing that it was happening then. It's been happening throughout history. It's happening now. Yeah. It's going to happen until the end. I mean, it's just like we always talk about this big circle, and that's all it is. Because if you've been in church at all, you have dealt with or seen people like this. And sad to say, maybe some of us have been this person at one time in our lives. I mean, very possibly could happen.
Well, I can say I've been on both sides of it.
Uh-huh.
I have been a deacon on a church board, and I was probably more like that than I would care. I talked a big game, but I didn't want it. Mm-hmm. So I was a critiquer. And then I pastored a church one time where everybody thought they had better ideas than mine, but nobody wanted to do anything.
Right.
So I've been on both sides of it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's heartbreaking.
This one statement is happening in every church at some point, if not every church right now.
Yes.
I mean, it's just the truth.
If you think about it, and those have been in church a while, and this needs to be our mindset, because anytime we get to the point where we want the pastor to say what we want him to say, or we want the teachers to say what they want us to say, without first going in prayer, talking to them in person, asking them why they teach the way they teach, without having those conversations, then we've got the wrong mindset. Mm-hmm. We've got an us agenda and not a God agenda.
And that's when you see people, they're either going to rule or they're going to run it.
Yeah.
That's their two options. I'm going to rule this place or I'm going to run this place. And that's the type of person this gentleman was, for sure.
I don't think you see the fruits in the church that way.
Yeah.
So reading down from 10 through 11, and remember, he literally says he does not accept what we say, which is
no, he doesn't. Yeah. So basically, he doesn't even believe the doctrine that they all believe. I mean,
for this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds, which he does, unjustly accusing us with wicked words. And not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren either. And he forbids those who desire to do so and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God, and the one who does evil has not seen God. So obviously he says, when I come, we're going to discuss this. I'm going to draw attention to it. Mm-hmm. The elders are going to come together. That have been the process, and we're going to walk through him getting on the right path, or you got to go, because you can't have somebody destroying the church on the inside. There's got to be a protection and a guardianship inside the church, and that's why God puts us here as a body united to be mindful of things. So if we see something wrong, let's correct it. Not saying there won't ever be anything wrong. There will be wrong things. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us will need to be corrected at one point in time or another, or some of us multiple times. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding. I just stared at you for a second. I was just joking, though.
I need it. I wasn't even paying attention. I was reading my notes.
See,
I don't even know what you're saying.
Corrected for not paying attention.
I don't even know what you're saying.
But we all need correction and redirection, because it's easy to get on the wrong path, and it's easy to get there fast. And the whole point is, he says, I wrote something to the church to fix this. But obviously it didn't work, so now he's going to have to go and deal with it.
Yeah.
And so when we notice a problem, that's why we're supposed to go and talk to our brothers and sisters in Christ and be like, I'm noticing something not okay. Let's talk. And then let's get a course correction and let's move on. And once you get the repentance, which is what has to happen when those wrong things happen, and listen, we have to deal with this all the time. We don't have a perfect church. We have to deal with this stuff regularly. And you know what? I would rather deal with that regularly than pretend like we don't have problems. Mm-hmm. I think there's too many churches acting like they don't have problems.
You end up with those broken churches that a lot of us have been a part of.
And eventually you'll have a blow up, or you'll be so inward focused that you'll never bring anybody else in because you're so focused on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was his hang up. I mean, he loved to have the recognition. He loved the attention. He had to be the center of attraction.
And didn't even want to receive the brethren, because what happens when you receive the brethren? Well, you're exalting your brethren. Yeah. You're doing great work. You're doing good work. And if you're exalting a brethren in that manner, then obviously he's feeling like, well, you're slighting me. What about me? I'm doing all this. So let's not even help the brethren now. Let's not reach out and help the homeless, the needy, the hurting, the widows, the orphans. Let's not help them, because if we help them, then it's taking away from glorifying me. When by helping them, we're glorifying God. Which is why I think that's one of the big reasons we're really focusing on the orphans and the elderly this year. It's like our big push is to get ourselves focused on what God says we should focus on. And by doing that, we're seeing salvations.
Yeah.
Not because we're so good.
Salvation's in a place where people kind of have just thought it was over, to put it.
I love that. I haven't led one person to the Lord there. And that excites me, because that means people inside the church are doing work.
Yep. Another thing here, it said this guy, he preached a whole message about this one guy, and I listened to most of it today. But he said he was guilty of 5 charges. Number 1, he must occupy the leading place. We've covered that. Number 2, he actually refused to receive John. Dustin talked about that. Yep. Number 3, he made malicious statements against the apostles. So he actually was saying everything that the apostles was teaching was wrong, as he was trying to be a leader in this church, believe it or not. Number 4, he refused to entertain the missionaries. We've talked about that, or the people coming through that was teaching. And number 5, he excommunicated those who did entertain the missionaries. So if you did accept all these people like John's telling him to do, he was kicking them out of the church. And to frankly put it, they really showed that he's not even had a leadership in the church. He was just that big of a bully.
Yeah.
It's from what everything. They really don't think he was an elder in the church. He was just that big of a bully in that church.
He doesn't call him anything of that leadership.
No,
Kind of a self-proclaimed.
Yeah. And that does happen too.
It does happen. So, beloved, do not imitate what is evil. So he's giving us clear direction. Don't imitate what's evil. So if you have attributes that are lining up with Diotrephes, you got to get rid of them. If you have attributes that are lining up with Gaius, then let's look at them. What else do we need to do? What, that's good. Let's keep.
Or Demetrius that we're getting ready to talk about.
We're going to talk about Demetrius, who's good.
And see Gaius. If you guys do a little study on Gaius, you'll see him in Acts. You also see him in. There was 3 places I went and read about him, that exact person, today. So he's all over other places in the Bible. But Dustin's getting ready to read about Demetrius. And I want you to think about something you're reading about this. This one verse is the only time this guy's mentioned in the whole Bible.
So verse 12, it says, Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. And we add our testimony. And you know that our testimony is true. Let's stop there for just a second, because I think that's all you get about Demetrius.
That's it. That's everything that is wrote about this guy in the whole Bible.
But I love his testimony isn't even from him. His
but look how
testimony
sound.
is from a bunch of people saying, we watched him do great work.
Look how sound in the faith he is by everybody else seeing him, what they said about him. You know he's sound in the faith.
From everyone and the truth. From the word, which we know the truth is Christ, right? Christ is the truth. So his testimony is good from everyone and Jesus. I mean, if you make a cut to get in the Bible, that's the paragraph you want.
He's a shining light in the New Testament, and he has one scripture. So I got to think about this today. How many Demetriuses do we have sitting in our church? Those ones, they're not there. They don't want the center stage. They don't want to be in front of the lights. They want to do what God wants them to do to further the kingdom, even if nobody sees it. And our church is full of them. Our church is full of these people right here. If you was rewriting something right now, you might put their name in there one time. And every Sunday, every Wednesday, they're serving, teaching people, doing what needs to be done to further the kingdom. And I just feel like our church is full of a lot of Demetriuses.
So we were asked the question because we did a Q&R thing at teen camp. And the question was, why don't we have deacons and these positions and elders announced in our church and given in our church? And quite frankly, it's because I think we have a lot of people doing the job that do the job well without notification, without being out noticed by the world. God knows their role. Pastor Hayden and I, we talk about them often, and we mentor several of them. But I think that sometimes, especially in our culture, for some reason, when you get a title, it goes to your head. I was a deacon for a long time, and I think that was some of my worst years with the Lord, because I was living out a title and some authority instead of being humble and exalting the King. And it was the title that got me sidetracked. I felt like, well, I have to do something. Then I started feeling like, well, I get to do something. Well, I'm the one that's supposed to do something. All of a sudden, I don't care about the opinion of others. This is my job. And it's funny how that works. I think that's just our culture. And when you get a bunch of people doing that, the church gets flipped upside down the wrong way. But when you have people doing those roles,
And they don't want the limelight. Yeah.
that's powerful. And you know, and I'm not big on voting anyway, because votes are popularity. And maybe it's just because I was never real popular.
That's probably it.
That's probably it.
I never lost one.
And he's been humble about it every day since. But, you know, I think sometimes we get caught up on let's vote for this, let's vote for that, when I would rather have a bunch of people that don't want anybody to know who they are to sit down and pray over something and then come to one accord and watch what God does.
Yeah.
Because that's what we've got to see at church. That's what we've seen the entire time. That's why we don't have church membership. That's because I think there's only one membership. You get the membership to the kingdom of heaven. I can't offer you one better than that. So his benefits are way better than what I can give you. But I think that's what you see in Demetrius. He's behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes.
It says no real role, except he is good testimony from everyone and Jesus.
Humble saint.
So it closes out, it says, I had many things to write to you, but am not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Peace to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. And I think part of that is the rest of what we need to talk about, we'll talk about face to face, because some of that is going to be about.
Oh, I think it's mainly about
And it's going to be about what do we need to do here, and that's not for everybody's business when you're dealing with discipline inside the church.
You know, we think about John as the beloved one and the one Jesus loved, but you got to remember he wrote that. First of all, he's the one that called himself the one Jesus loved, and he does write a lot about love. But you also remember what Jesus called him, and Jesus called him the Son of Thunder. And I really think he's in this letter, and he's like, I'm coming, and I'm coming with thunder, and I'm coming after that guy. Because I really do think he was wanting to see a change in him.
Because he's destroying the church, so he needs to change or he needs to move out.
Yeah. So I think he was coming as the Son of Thunder. I don't think he was coming as the beloved one at this point.
And I will give you this, that about Demetrius, it is believed that he was the deliverer of those 3 letters. That he took them from John to
And delivered
the
them.
people they were supposed to go to.
Yep.
So we got a few minutes for questions.